I never imagined that my life would take such a brutal turn on what seemed like an ordinary afternoon. It was a Friday, calm and uneventful, with no hint of the storm about to hit me. The day began like any other: a quick coffee, a busy work routine, and the comforting thought that the weekend was near. I was planning something special for the two of us. Lately, I felt like we needed to reconnect. Small signs of distance had appeared in recent weeks, but I honestly thought it was just the exhaustion of our daily lives catching up with us. He had grown quieter than usual. His answers were short, almost automatic. His eyes no longer sparkled the way they used to. Deep down, I sensed that a shadow was growing between us, but I chose to ignore it. Not because I was naive, but because love is sometimes clinging desperately to the belief that everything can be fixed. I believed that, until that moment. After a hectic morning at work, I got some unexpected news. The company's system had crashed, and everyone was allowed to leave early. The idea of having some extra time excited me. I decided to surprise him. I stopped by a store, bought our favorite bottle of wine, and even thought about preparing that dinner he always praised. When I got home, everything seemed normal. The living room was quiet, bathed in the soft light of the late afternoon. I set my things down on the couch and headed upstairs toward the bedroom, holding the bottle of wine with a smile on my face. But as I approached, something started to feel off. It's hard to explain. Maybe it was intuition. Maybe it was the heavy silence in the air. My heart started racing for no apparent reason, and an unsettling feeling gripped me. And then I heard it, a soft laugh coming from our bedroom. For a second, I thought I was imagining things. Maybe it was the TV. Maybe he was on the phone. But no, the laugh came again, and this time I knew. My heart raced, and my legs felt like lead. Every step toward the door was torture. Part of me begged to be wrong, to find some innocent explanation. But when I pushed the door open slowly, hope shattered into 1,000 pieces. There, right before my eyes, was a scene I never thought I would witness. He, the man I loved and trusted, was in our bed with another woman. For a moment, time seemed to stop. My vision blurred, the air left my lungs, and my heart pounded so hard I could barely think. They were so caught up in their moment that they didn't even notice I was there. The wine bottle slipped from my hands and hit the floor with a deafening crash. Glass shattered, and the red liquid spilled everywhere, spreading like an irreversible stain, a perfect metaphor for what was happening to my life. He turned around, and for a brief second, our eyes met. The panic on his face was unmistakable. He tried to speak, tried to explain, but I wasn't interested in listening. There were no words in the world that could erase that image from my mind. "How could you?" was all I could manage to say. My voice came out low, almost a whisper, but it was heavy with pain and disbelief. He took a step toward me, but I instinctively backed away. I didn't want to hear excuses. I didn't want explanations. The only thing my body demanded was escape. Get away from that scene before I completely broke down. I turned and ran down the stairs without looking back. I don't even know how I made it to my car. My thoughts were in complete disarray, a whirlwind of emotions consuming me. I started the engine and drove aimlessly, leaving behind my house, our house, along with every certainty I thought I had. The streets were busy, but to me, the world around me had lost its color. Everything felt distant, like I was trapped inside a bubble, isolated from the rest of the universe. I couldn't stop replaying that scene in my mind over and over again, like a broken tape. Eventually, I parked near a small park. I'm not sure how long I sat there, staring into nothingness. The sky slowly changed from bright blue to the vibrant orange of sunset until darkness finally took over. And with the darkness came the inevitable flood of tears. I cried. I cried until I had no strength left, until my sobs turned into a heavy silence. Each tear seemed to carry away a part of my story, a memory of the happy moments now tainted by betrayal. The pain was unbearable, but along with it, a new feeling began to rise: anger. Not the explosive kind that blinds you, but the cold, calculated anger that forces you to re-examine every detail, every moment, in search of answers. And it was there, sitting in that park, that I made a decision. I would not be defeated by this. The pain was real. The betrayal was devastating. But I was still here, still breathing, still alive. That was the first step. When dawn broke, the world outside carried on, as if nothing had happened. Cars sped by, people rushed to work, and the city buzzed with its usual energy. But for me, everything felt frozen in time. I had spent the night in that small park with the weight of betrayal pressing down on my chest. The events of the previous day replayed endlessly in my mind, like a haunting movie I couldn't escape. I knew I couldn't stay there forever. The question was, where would I go? Home was no longer an option, not after what I had seen. The very thought of stepping back into that house, smelling the familiar scent of our life together, made my stomach churn. Every piece of furniture, every photo on the wall would be a cruel reminder of what I had lost. I grabbed my phone, hesitating for a moment before scrolling through my contacts. There was no one I wanted to talk to. How do you even begin to explain something like this? But before I knew it, my fingers had already dialed the number of the only person I felt I could trust at that moment. My best friend, Emma. Emma was the kind of friend everyone dreams of having. Fiercely loyal, endlessly patient, and always ready to drop everything at a moment's notice if I needed her. The phone rang twice before her familiar voice filled the line, cheerful and oblivious to the storm that had just wrecked my life. "Hey, you, what's up? Early morning call. Did you win the lottery or something?" she joked. I tried to speak, but no words came out. My throat tightened, and the tears threatened to fall again. "Hello? Are you there?" Emma's voice was now filled with concern. I need you," I finally whispered. That was all it took. 15 minutes later, her car pulled up beside the park. She jumped out and ran toward me, her face a mix of confusion and worry. Without a word, she wrapped me in a hug, and for the first time since the nightmare began, I felt a tiny bit of relief. We drove in silence back to her apartment, a cozy little place filled with mismatched furniture and the comforting smell of vanilla candles. Emma didn't press me for details right away. She knew me well enough to wait until I was ready to talk. Instead, she handed me a blanket, made a strong cup of coffee, and sat down next to me on the couch. "Whenever you're ready," she said softly. And so I told her everything, every detail, every feeling, every raw piece of pain that had been tearing me apart. Emma listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from shock to fury to heartbreak. "That son of a... How could he do that to you? After everything?" she finally blurted out, her eyes blazing with anger on my behalf. I shook my head, still unable to fully process it myself. I don't know. I keep asking myself if I missed the signs, If there was something I could have done differently. Emma grabbed my hands, her grip firm and grounding. "Number, this is not on you. People make choices, and his choice was to betray you. You didn't cause this. You didn't deserve this." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I had been blaming myself since the moment I saw him with her. What if I had been more attentive? What if I had noticed the distance sooner? But deep down, I knew she was right. This wasn't my fault. It was his. We spent the rest of the morning talking, planning, and slowly piecing together what my next steps would be. Emma offered to let me stay with her for as long as I needed, and for that I was endlessly grateful. But I knew I couldn't hide forever. By the afternoon, a new resolve had started to form inside me. I didn't just want to survive this. I wanted to rise above it, to rebuild stronger and wiser than before. Step 1, face the mess head on. With Emma by my side, we returned to my house. The place felt eerily quiet, as if holding its breath. The broken glass from the wine bottle still lay on the floor, the stain on the carpet, a painful reminder of everything that had happened. "Let's get rid of it," Emma said, grabbing a broom and a cloth. We cleaned in silence, working together to erase every trace of that moment. Piece by piece, we restored the room to its former state. It felt symbolic somehow, like I was reclaiming a part of myself. Once we were done, I stood in the middle of the living room, taking a deep breath. The air felt lighter. It was still my home, my space. His betrayal might have tainted it for a moment, but it didn't define it, or me. And in that moment, I made another decision. I wouldn't let him take any more from me. Not my peace, not my joy, and definitely not my future. The confrontation was behind me, but the journey ahead was far from over. I had taken the first step by reclaiming my voice, but healing isn't a straight path. It's messy, unpredictable, and filled with highs and lows. The first few days felt liberating, like I had peeled off a layer of suffocating weight. I rediscovered the small joys that had been overshadowed by my heartbreak. Morning walks through the park felt different, brighter, calmer. Music I had avoided for weeks found its way back into my life. Each song, once a trigger for old memories, now sounded like a fresh start. But freedom didn't mean I was immune to the pain. Some nights were still hard. The silence of my apartment could feel deafening, and old thoughts crept in when I least expected them. Regret whispered in my ear, asking if confronting him had been the right choice. Loneliness sometimes curled around me like a cold blanket. Still, there was something different this time, a fire inside me that refused to be extinguished. I started focusing on the things I had neglected for too long. My work became a safe harbor, a place where I could pour my energy and talent without distraction. Projects that once felt tedious now seemed exciting, a chance to prove to myself what I was capable of. Then there were my friends, the unsung heroes of this chapter of my life. They had been there all along, waiting patiently for me to reach out. And when I did, they rallied around me like a protective shield. There were nights filled with laughter, dinners where the conversation flowed freely, and spontaneous adventures that reminded me how much life there was left to live. My best friend Emily practically moved into my apartment for a week, armed with bottles of wine, snacks, and the firm belief that no heartbreak could survive a Netflix marathon and some questionable dance moves at midnight. "You're too amazing to let this define you," she said one night, her eyes filled with fierce loyalty. "He's just a chapter, a plot twist, but you You're the whole damn story." Her words stuck with me, echoing in my mind during moments of doubt. I had spent so much time defining myself by what had happened, by the betrayal and the pain, that I had forgotten who I was before it all. So, I started rebuilding, not to become who I was before, but to discover a new version of myself. I took up new hobbies. Some I had always been curious about, but never had the time or courage to try. Yoga became a sanctuary, a way to ground myself when my thoughts threatened to spiral. I started journaling, pouring my feelings onto paper with no filter, no judgment, just raw, unpolished truth. And then there was travel, not the kind of glamorous, jet-setting adventure you see on Instagram, but small trips that breathe new life into my routine. A weekend in a nearby town, wandering through streets I had never walked before. Sunrises on the beach, where the crashing waves reminded me that life was constant, always moving forward, no matter what storms came. Through it all, I learned the power of small victories. It wasn't about dramatic transformations or sudden epiphanies. It was about showing up for myself every day, even when it felt hard, especially when it felt hard. Some days, healing felt like a sprint, full of energy and determination. Other days, it was a slow crawl, dragging myself through the hours with nothing more than sheer stubbornness. And that was okay. I gave myself permission to feel everything: the joy, the sadness, the anger, the relief. Every emotion was a piece of the puzzle, a step toward becoming whole again. And with each passing day, the shadows of the past grew dimmer. The betrayal that had once defined me became just another story I carried, not a scar, but a reminder of how far I had come. By the time autumn rolled around, I hardly recognized the person I had been months ago. Not because everything had magically fallen into place, but because I had changed, grown, strengthened. There was a strange beauty in that transformation, a quiet, unspoken strength that came from surviving something I once thought would break me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to embrace the unknown, ready to let go of the last threads of what had been, ready to step fully into the life that awaited me. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Life had a way of moving forward, even when it felt like time should have stood still. Slowly but surely, I found myself building a new version of my life, a version that was entirely mine. Each morning, I woke up a little stronger, a little braver. My once empty calendar began to fill with things that brought me joy. Coffee dates with friends, weekend hikes, and quiet evenings curled up with a book. Little by little, the heaviness in my chest began to lift, replaced by a growing sense of lightness and freedom. The journey wasn't without its challenges. There were moments when I doubted myself, when old wounds threatened to reopen, whispering that I had made a mistake. But every time those doubts crept in, I reminded myself of everything I had survived. I had walked through the fire and come out on the other side. That strength was mine now, unshakable and real. One evening, as I stood in front of the mirror, I barely recognized the person staring back at me. Not because I looked different, but because I felt different. There was a spark in my eyes that hadn't been there for a long time. A quiet confidence, a newfound peace. I smiled at my reflection, remembering how lost I had felt just months before. It was hard to believe how far I had come, how much I had grown. There was still healing to be done, of course. There always would be. But I was no longer afraid of the unknown. If anything, I welcomed it. One night, while scrolling through my phone, I noticed a message from a number I hadn't seen in a long time. It was him. His words were polite, but familiar. A simple, "Hey, hope you're doing well." For a moment, my heart paused. The old me would have felt a rush of emotions: hope, longing, confusion. But now, there was only clarity. I had no anger left, no sadness, just a quiet understanding that our chapter had ended, and that was okay. I put the phone down without replying, feeling nothing but peace. I didn't need closure from him anymore. I had given that gift to myself. In the following weeks, new opportunities began to appear, almost as if the universe had been waiting for me to be ready. A chance to travel, to explore parts of the world I had only dreamed about. A new job that excited me in ways I hadn't felt in years. And most importantly, a deeper connection with myself. I learned to trust my instincts again, to listen to my inner voice. I no longer silenced my needs or made myself small to fit into someone else's life. Instead, I expanded, growing into the space I had reclaimed for myself. One afternoon, standing on a mountaintop, much like the one in that old photo, I looked out at the vast horizon and realized something profound. This was just the beginning. The possibilities were endless, and for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to embrace them. I had learned that heartbreak wasn't just an ending. It was also a beginning. It was a chance to rediscover who you are, to rebuild your life brick by brick on your own terms. And while the road ahead was still uncertain, I no longer feared it. Instead, I welcomed it, because I knew that no matter what came next, I had everything I needed within me to face it: strength, resilience, joy, and most importantly, a deep, unshakable love for the person I had become. As the wind carried my laughter across the mountains, I closed my eyes and made a promise, not to anyone else, but to myself. This time, I would never settle for anything less than the life I truly deserved. The road ahead was wide open, and I was finally ready to run toward it with open arms.